khi Datio thi IELTS Speaking với cựu giám khảo.
Great. So, the first question I need to ask is, how do I pronounce your name?
Oh, you can call me Dat or Daddy-o. It sounds kind of funny.
Dat or Datio?
No, but just call me Dad. I think that's my real name. Daddy-o is more like a nickname that my friend gave me, but I think it's cute. That's why I chose that for my channel.
Right. Fantastic. It's a great name. I like it, Datio. But I'll call you Dat. That's fine.
Keith,
yeah,
right?
Keith, that's right. Exactly. With that strange th sound. So many people struggle with.
Yeah.
Keith, so I'm based here in Spain. Where do you live, Dat?
I'm currently living in Saigon, or people would call it Ho Chi Minh City, but I prefer Saigon because it's kind of reminiscent of the past, you know?
Yeah, indeed. So is that your hometown, or is your hometown a different place?
It's my hometown, actually. I was born and raised here, and I actually have been living here, my whole life. I know that I did move to Singapore to study for a few years, and then I came back here. But my life, it doesn't feel very different from before. So yeah, I'm living here currently.
Right. And what do you like about Saigon or Ho Chi Minh City?
Oh, I feel pretty fortunate to be living here because I got access to pretty much any amenity that you can possibly think of, right? And it's very modern. It's very convenient to live here, and I'm a foodie as well. So like I love eating. So I have a passion for eating, trying different cuisines, and particularly Saigon, has a variety of cuisines, and I can try as many kinds of food that I can think of.
Right. So you've been in that city since you were born. Has that city changed over the years?
Over the years, you mean over the last 10 years?
Over the last 10 years, 15 years, yeah.
I didn't really, pay attention, but the most striking change is probably the fact that it has gotten more polluted and hotter, so much hotter than before. I think it's the same situation for a lot of mega cities that are growing. But Saigon definitely has a lot more residential, areas, apartment complexes and skyscrapers. So I think that's it's kind of a nice thing to have, but at the same time, the infrastructure cannot really accommodate that many people, and
right.
I think it's a good and bad thing, and also it's getting more polluted over time because of the volume of traffic on the road as well. So I really hope that in the future something should be done about the congestion issue over here. So that would definitely help with the air pollution problem as well.
Right. Very interesting. Great. So let's have a look at some of the great Band 9 language that Dat is using here to talk about hometown. First of all, I noticed he said it's reminiscent of the past. That's lovely. Reminiscent, lovely word. Reminiscent of means reminds me of the past. Great. I was born and raised here. Now we could also say I was born and raised, I was born and bred here, meaning I was born and grew up here. So nice language. This is a binomial, born and bred, born and raised. Lovely language. Next, we've got a great example of what I see as kind of building blocks to make more complex sentences, right? So Datio says, I've got access to pretty much any amenity you could think of. Look at the blocks here, right? Now, a simple lower level student may say, I've got access to all amenities, right? The amenities are the facilities that you may get in a city, right? Maybe a The library, the shops, the shopping mall, the gymnasium, all of these amenities, right? So I've got access to all amenities. Then you could add pretty much. I've got access to pretty much all amenities. And then you can add another block. I've got access to pretty much any amenity you could think of, right? Can you see the building blocks are making more complex sentences? It doesn't have to be strange, unusual tenses. This is also very, very nice language. Moving on, he uses the word foodie. Nice, informal English, very good. I'm a foodie, a person who loves eating, loves food. And notice this sentence, right? The infrastructure cannot accommodate that many people. So again, nice language. The infrastructure refers to the roads, the bridges, the buildings. So the infrastructure of the city cannot accommodate that many people. Here, meaning that the roads are on and the space is not enough for that many people, right? It can't accommodate. This restaurant can't accommodate 100 people. There's not enough space. Really nice language. Overall, I notice he's using, a wide range of vocabulary very flexibly, right? We're talking about hometown. He talks about infrastructure, mega cities, residential areas, skyscrapers, amenities, right? Clearly, huge flexibility to talk about this topic. Also notice any pauses are not for vocabulary. Any pause that he makes is actually just for the idea. And again, this is natural Band 9 speaking. You can pause just to think of an idea. That is absolutely fine. And finally, let me just address this question, because a lot of people say, when we are asked about hometown, is that the place where we live or the place where we were born, right? The short answer is your hometown is where you were born, right? But also, it doesn't matter that much, right? The examiner first doesn't know if it's true or not, and secondly, doesn't care. The point is we're talking about a town and a place where you have some experiences. So don't get too anxious or worried about, which city should I talk about, right? Yes, it should be the place where you were born. But if you want to talk about the place where you live now, then you could as well. It doesn't matter that much, right? As they say, don't sweat the small stuff. Let's carry on with the next topic. Now, what about you and your weekends? So what do you do at the weekends?
Well, I don't know if people know this fact about me, but I'm self-employed. I don't work for other people, so I don't have really clear boundaries between like a weekday and a weekend. But I try my best to schedule some downtime on the weekend to hang out with friends, catch up with them, grab a coffee together because I love coffee. So yeah, of course we all need to relax sometime, right? So That's what I tend to do on the weekends. But if work calls for it, I sometimes I would have to spend the whole weekend just working on my deadlines. So yeah.
Right. So what about last weekend? What did you do last weekend?
Let me try to remember. Well, it was like just a typical weekend like any other weekend. So I think I started my day with how do I say this? So I started my day by finishing some of the tasks that on my to-do list, and then I just grabbed a coffee with my best friend, and just took it easy, spent some quality time with him. Right. So that's what I did, I think.
What about most people in your hometown? I mean, how do they spend the weekends typically?
Oh, people in my hometown, like people in Saigon. As far as I know, I think Vietnamese people are really big on, spending time at cafes and drinking coffee in the morning, especially on Saturdays and Sundays, with either their family or friends, and I'm no exception. What else do they do? Well, a lot of youngsters and even older generations, they hang out at the mall as well. Because, Vietnam, Saigon in particular is so warm. So people tend to seek refuge in those malls, that are air conditioned, and do a bit of window shopping or drink tea, coffee, or have lunch in those malls. Nice. I think that's a lot of people. That's what a lot of people do here in Vietnam. Yeah.
Nice. And have you got any plans for next weekend?
Next weekend, I don't know if it's going to be very different from this weekend, but most likely I'm going to be doing the same stuff I do this week. But considering the fact that I'm kind of up to my neck at the moment in deadlines, I think I'm going to spend my next weekend working on my deadlines before I can think of taking any time off,
Right. You're a busy man. Gosh.
I try to keep busy. Yeah.
Brilliant. So let's have a look at some of the language and also some of the tactics that Dat is using. In fact, let's begin with some of these tactics, right? So he does sometimes self-correction, and that's really good, right? If you make a mistake and you realize, just correct yourself straight away. And he makes this is a native speaker kind of mistake. He says, I need to schedule some downtime, right? Just mispronounce the word downtown and downtime. Perfectly natural, but instantly just corrects himself as he goes, as a native speaker would do. The other thing he does is he creates some thinking time, right? I think when I asked him about last weekend, he said, let me try to remember. Let me try to remember, giving himself some time to think. Brilliant, good tactic. Also, similarly, he asks himself the question, right? Like you're thinking, what else do they do? Oh, yes, right? So you're almost asking yourself the question. Native speakers do it. Absolutely great. Good tactics to gain time to think. IELTS, you really need to get, you need time to think of ideas. Everybody does. So these are ways to do it. What about the language? Well, some very, very nice, I would say that is a band 9 speaker. Some great language here. He has this informal language, often with phrasal verbs, right? Hang out with friends, right? Spend time with friends. Catch up with them, right? To get up to date with what they're doing. Some idiomatic expressions I noticed. If work calls for it. So if it's necessary for work, right? If work calls for it, then I'll stay late. I'll work longer, right? If it's necessary for work. If work calls for it. Lovely. Up to my neck in deadlines. I'm up to my neck in deadlines. I have too many deadlines. I'm up to my neck in work. I'm up to my neck in bills to pay, maybe, right? Very, very nice idiomatic expression. Now, another key thing I want to point out is in part 1 in the test, there is very often, right, quick changes in tense. So quick changes from the present tense to the past to the future. And this is deliberate to see if you can use different tenses flexibly and quickly, right? So we started in the present, talking about present habit, and things that Dat said were they seek refuge in those malls. They seek refuge, which is nice language, right? That means that they look for shelter from the heat because it's so hot in Saigon or Ho Chi Minh City. It's so hot that they look for shelter in the air-conditioned shopping malls. But the key thing is it's the present tense, right? They seek refuge in those malls. They do a bit of window shopping. Lovely language, right? Window shopping, where you don't actually spend money, but they do a bit of window shopping. So clear, simple, present tense. But then notice the switch. When I talk about last weekend, he thinks, but then he says, oh, I grabbed a coffee. I took it easy. Switches fluently into past tenses with nice connection as well. Grabbed a coffee, right? Take a coffee or took a coffee. Took it easy. Took it easy. Took it easy. Well, that has a more American accent, right? Took it easy. But the connection is the same with both of those. And then when we switch to the future, right, what will you do? He uses going to with the present continuous tense, right? Most likely, I'm going to be doing the same stuff. Brilliant. And what's more, he makes the contraction of going to gonna, right? I'm going to be doing the same stuff. Fantastic. Very flexible use of different tenses. And that is a key thing to look out for in part 1. I'm interested in Vietnam and the clothes in Vietnam, because I think you have some quite interesting clothes in your country, because I've been to Vietnam. Tell me a bit about the kind of clothes people wear there.
Do we wear in Vietnam? It depends on what occasion we're talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if I have a translation for all the traditional costumes that we wear,
right.
But normally when we go out on a normal day, probably I see people wear jeans, t-shirts, shirts, just the usual that you would see on the street.
So when do people wear the traditional kind of clothes?
Oh, like áo dài. I think you've heard of this term, right?
Yeah.
One situation I can think of is when like female students, they have to put on áo dài during the first day during Monday, on each Monday of the week. So I think because they have to, it's sort of the rule, the regulation in a lot of the schools in Vietnam for females to put on áo dài. But it's sort of unfair because like the guys, the male students, they wear the same uniform, right? And I have no idea why. And I see people wear áo dài when during Tet or some bigger festivals in Vietnam,
right?
Because that's time for them to take photos and just show off on social media. So looking traditional, I think attracts a lot of attention.
Right.
Yeah.
And do you think it's a good idea to have a obligatory school uniform for school children?
Oh, school children. I suppose that would be a good idea because you would need to be able to identify who is a student at your school. So I think having requiring students to wear uniform would do the trick. And also to create a sense of community, if you're wearing uniform, you feel a sense of belonging to that community. And especially if you come from a really prestigious school, you would want to feel like you belong there and you would want to show that to the whole world. So I think wearing uniform, it has a few advantages.
Right. What about adults? I mean, how do you feel about adults wearing uniform in the workplace? Should adults be forced to wear uniforms in the workplace?
This is kind of interesting, but I feel like it shouldn't be made mandatory because, for example, if we're talking about front desk workers like a bank teller, right? If you're serving customers, you have to meet with customers on a daily basis, then sure, I think wearing uniform is advisable because you would want to project this air of professionalism to clients in order to build trust with them, right? So wearing uniform for those staff is kind of essential and expected. But if you're working in the back office, you're in charge of just the business operations side. I think I think your productivity doesn't really depend on looking professional. So I don't think that those staff should be made to wear uniform, because I don't think it serves any function.
Right. Good point. Do you agree with this idea that you can judge a person by the clothes that they wear?
People usually say, don't judge a book by its cover. And I think there's some validity to it, but it's not always accurate because, in society, we tend to judge people quickly by the clothes that they put on. And I feel like it depends on the profession as well. For example, if you're a salesperson, you need to kind of make a good impression with your client, because there's no other cues for them to judge you, whether you are successful, whether you are trustworthy. So looking presentable and professional and smart is essential in this case, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean that you are successful or you have you earn a very lucrative income by looking smart and looking, dressed in a blazer. It doesn't equate with that, right? But for other mega rich people like Mark Zuckerberg, he's always dressed in like simple and plain clothes, and he's one of the the most affluent individuals on earth. So I think that it's not an accurate metric. Clothes are not an accurate metric to measure a person's worth.
Yeah, very interesting. That's great. Very good conversation about clothes. Brilliant. I'll stop kind of the intense questioning there.
Oh, thank you.
So in part 3, we looked at the topic of clothes, right? So first of all, again, I think a very good tactic and a very good tip for part 3 is to give lots of examples. And Dat does this really well. Examples help you develop your answer, be more specific, and so bring out a wider range of vocabulary, right? For example, when we were talking about judging people by their clothes, Dat says, well, for example, if you're a salesperson, and then he goes on to elaborate. Or the opposite, he says, if a lot of mega rich people like Mark Zuckerberg, they dress in very simple clothes. So he's giving lots of examples to develop his answer. Really important in part 3. Vocabulary, again, at band 9, you're using a very wide range of vocabulary, great sense of collocation and style to express precise meaning. And Dat does this. Have a look at some of the things he said. Requiring students to wear a uniform would do the trick. Lovely expression, right? Meaning that would work well, right? It would do the trick. It does the trick. It works well to do that. Make a good impression, good collocation. A prestigious school, prestigious meaning reputable or esteemed, having a good reputation. Project an air of professionalism, right? To look like you are professional. Looking presentable, that well-dressed, well-groomed, looking presentable. Have a lucrative income, right? So being well-paid or profitable, and not an accurate metric. Good collocation, accurate metric. Metric being when you measure something, it's the standard by which you measure it. So a metric of being wealthy, maybe your car, if you have a house, maybe the clothes you wear, these are all different metrics. So the language, the vocabulary is great. I think there's idiomatic expressions, there are collocations and precise meaning. Also notice the phrasal verbs again, right? To show off on social media. Phrasal verbs are very natural spoken English. Getting the right ones, especially with two prepositions to show off on social media, really difficult, but done really well. Overall, fluency is great, right? I mean, there's fluency over long sentences and the ability to develop topics, as I mentioned with examples, linking sentence after sentence. The cohesion and coherence is really solid. Very, very nice. I'll just mention a couple of other things which I think are worth talking about. One of them is the translation of your local language. So talking about clothes, Dat wanted to use a local word, right? A Vietnamese word. And he said, I don't know if I have a translation for the typical costumes we wear. And then he went on to use the word, right? That is absolutely fine. You can use one or two words in your own language if there isn't a translation. There probably isn't a ready translation. Just make sure you're making the meaning clear and it's absolutely fine, right? So in this case, I thought that was perfect, a perfect opportunity. Often clothes, food, drink, plants, trees, titles of films and books, we don't have a translation in English. So just say it in your own language and just make it clear what it is you're saying. Another interesting feature of natural spoken conversation for native speakers is what we call a restart, is where you're saying a sentence and in the middle you kind of stop and then you change and then express it in a different way. It's absolutely fine to do this, right? His example was, I see people wear this during TEV or some big festival. So he was probably going to say, I see people wear this when the TEV festival happens. But then he changes to say, I see people wear this during TEV, which is the New Year festival. And that is natural, native-like speaker. You can do this. It's absolutely fine. You want to avoid the hesitation, the right? Not that, but just changing mid-sentence is absolutely fine. Lovely. Well done, Dat. For me, without a doubt, he's speaking Band 9 level English, but also clearly he's understanding of how the test works and some really good tactics and tips that you can also follow.